Ben Shapiro versus Destiny debate. Politics, Jan 6, Israel, Ukraine, and wokeism. This one's been in the works for a while. I remember hearing people talk about Lex Fridman and a Destiny versus Ben Shapiro debate for a while. Monogamy versus open relationships. Do you think Destiny is getting tired of talking about this? Like genuinely, you know? I don't even know, because he insists on producing this drama. Is he married, divorced? I heard something, but then I hear another. I don't even know what's going on with him. You guys want to know a secret? Okay. Basically, every powerful and large and wealthy entertainer is some kind of non-monogamous. Okay. It's either that or cheating. Seriously, every time there's a big expose on the life of a celebrity or some kind of media figure, almost every time they're around, either consensually or not. Like all the time that happens. It's so common. How does this open?
Like Trump.
As we approach the end, let us descend into the meme further and further. Ben, you're in a monogamous marriage.
Terrible suit. I hate his suit. I hate Lex Fridman so much. I'm never getting on his shit anyway because I know he has like a fragile ego. Remember when Elon Musk threatened to box Zuckerberg, a person who actually is physically fit, and when Zuckerberg accepted, Elon Musk out because he said like his mom wouldn't let him, and then just a few days afterward there were some staged photos of him throwing around Lex Fridman, and Lex Fridman tweeted like, wow, Elon Musk so powerful, I know he won't fight Zuckerberg, but like, wow, what a strong man, maybe best they fight with their minds for now. Like, he is such an slicking piece of shit brown nose sycophant. It's so pathetic. I hate Lex Fridman so much. Holy shit, that's sick. Yeah, he had no, like, nothing. Just empty man. Just a void man. Nothing. Empty.
How foundational is marriage, monogamous marriage, to the United States of America? Can open marriages work? Are they harmful to society? Ben?
Marriages are the single most important thing that people can do in the United States because the things within your control are easier to control than the things outside your control.
Does anyone else really like how Ben Shapiro has been leaning into like the bad boy thing? Because he can't do the boy genius thing anymore now that he's 40. So he's got like his leather bomber jacket or whatever, and he's like, yeah, you know, I'm like he's doing like the dark intellectual shift where you like shift instantly from boy genius Jimmy Neutron to this.
Marriages are the single most important thing that people can do in the United States because the things within your control are easier to control than the things outside your control.
What the literal does that mean? Does he mean like his wife? Like now it's easier to control your wife? What does that mean? I don't know what that means.
Well, people tend to think about big political change, obviously about things they can do to change the entire system. But the reality is the thing that you can do that best changes society is to get married and have kids and raise your kids responsibly.
Yeah, this is the Jordan Peterson take, where it's like, hey, don't mind the fact that I'm this super big influential person trying to change society. The most important thing you can do is just like get married and don't rock the boat, you know? Never mind the fact that, you know, I constantly try to like change society broadly. If he actually believed this, then he would be living on like the mountainside in a cottage somewhere, you know? But he's not, of course, because he knows he's lying.
That is the single best thing that you can do. Can an open marriage work? I mean, I think that it depends on your definition of work. So in my version of work, the answer is no, because what you actually need in order to facilitate the healthy growing of a child is a father and mother who are committed to each other. I'm
sorry, someone linked this. I know Elon Musk recently went with Ben Shapiro to Auschwitz, like the other day, to like talk about how people are anti-Semitic for not being pro-Zionist enough or whatever. He wore this? What is this? Why does he look like he's drunk at a wedding and like his friends had to like help him out of his tie or whatever? What the
all ideas about there being no emotional component to sexual activity are completely specious. That it is truer for men than it is for women, but it's not true for either. The idea of a full commitment to a human being with whom you
does Destiny have something stuck in his teeth? What's going on over there? What he's doing all kind of crazy mouth gymnastics right now, and he's not even the one talking.
Create children, which is typically how we've done it throughout human existence, is in fact the fundamental basis for any functional civilization. It allows for the transmission of culture and values. It allows for the transmission of beliefs and responsibility, and it gives the great lie to both the communitarian lie and the atomistic individualist lie. The communitarian lie is that you belong to the giant community of man, which is not true because you have a family.
Literally, what the fuck is blood waffling about? Literally, this is completely coherent. This doesn't mean anything. Like that. So please remember that like none of this means anything. There are two reasons why conservatives promote monogamy. Okay, one of them is insecurity, and the other one is because it goes in line with other like chauvinistic attitudes they have about controlling women. That's it. Otherwise, it would just be a personal preference thing. Oh, three. Also, people want conservatives want people to be atomized so that they don't relate to society broadly and don't believe in things like welfare. This is one of the reasons why the Black Panther Party didn't like their members marrying, because they thought it pulled people away from the cause. Conservatives want everyone to live in like a walled off bubble house in the suburbs, so you don't feel any like practical consequences of like social integration. You don't feel like a vibrant community. You don't see poor people. You don't engage with the world, and it makes you more selfish. By the way, this is how Margaret Thatcher cemented social conservatism in the UK. She had this really big push to like get people their own homes, and it ended up like home ownership ended up being the vehicle of like renewed social conservatism and neoliberalism in the UK, because as it turns out, like if you want people to stop giving a fuck about the poor and the homeless and everything else, like all the sort of foundational stuff upon which a healthy society is built, like social health, equality, whatever, all you have to do is give people a house and tell them, hey, if a homeless person walks in your neighborhood, it lowers the value of your property, the one largest asset you have. Now go to town, Tiger, and that's all you need. And then most people become like insane conservatives. It's what happened in the suburbs too, you know? That's why we have this whole stereotype of people living in the suburbs who are petrified of crime and like call the police every time a Hispanic teenager walks in front of their door or whatever, or in front of their street. It's all a part of it's all about social alienation. That's why people in suburbs kill themselves so much. There's no such thing as society. That was a quote from Thatcher. Yeah. Because conservatives don't want you to believe in society. It's purely a class interest thing. Conservatives believe in society as long as it relates only to wealthy people. Wealthy people and conservatives are fully aware of the fact that they have their own class interests. They run in their own social circles. Wealthy people are obsessed with society and social standing in their field. They care a lot about that. And they care a lot about statehood, too, the power of the state, the police, the military. What they don't care about is society of the proles. They don't care about society as it relates to ordinary people. They want you all atomized, because if you recognized your shared social and material interests, you would organize around them and you would be the most powerful force in the country. The collective social interests of the wealthy pale in comparison to the far larger social interests of the vastly more numerous poor and middle class. And for that reason, you know, they really want you to all think of yourselves as individuals. A bunch of little individual proletarian families and one big collective wealthy social class. And monogamy and non-monogamy are just a part of that, like one little piece of that broader strategy. I don't give a if you're monogamous or marry or whatever, like do whatever you want, you know? But conservatives don't say do whatever you want. That's not their argument. Their argument is not do whatever you want.
And your allegiance should be and is naturally to the members of your family first. That's how we learn, and then we expound that out. And it also is a lie to the notion that we are all atomistic individuals with no responsibilities. We are born into a world of responsibilities. Everyone is born into a world of responsibilities and rules and roles, and those are good. And if we do not...
See, his position is internally incoherent as well. See how he's saying that social atomization is a good thing and you are first reliant on the family, but then he's saying, actually, you live in a world of rules and responsibilities that you have to adhere to, and that's a good thing. These are inconsistent positions. How can he simultaneously believe that people are atomized, there's no such thing as society, you're first reliant on the family, but also here are all these social roles you have to integrate into? What he's describing fundamentally is the social root of fascism. You are born into the family, and the family is meant to be the model of the state. The family is the thing to which you are first adherent because you're literally born into it. That's just kind of a product of your birth. And then you are raised isolated, socially maligned, or not maligned, sorry, sort of socially walled off. The family is the unit that raises you, but the family is meant to be a sort of symbolic expression of the state's power, a patriarchal power with the father in charge. And the job of the family is to raise you into either a good soldier or a good baby factory. Notice how often conservatives talk about this. Conservatives will post videos of like 6-year-olds in China, like holding their breath underwater and say, look at how the Chinese are 1,000 years ahead of us. Our woke children will never be able to fire a gun. Like, conservatives are pretty mask off about the idea that when they see young boys and girls, what they see are targets for grooming. either into, like in the case of women, barely adolescent baby factories, which they want to keep barefoot and pregnant so they can produce 8 children for the state. Conservatives have openly praised the policies of like Orban in Hungary, which are promoting higher birth rates, which don't work, by the way, because people don't not have kids because they just didn't think to or whatever. And they see young boys and they think, oh, that young boy needs to grow into a strong soldier. Notice how they say soldier too and not worker. How much conservative propaganda have you seen where young children, young boys, are maligned or chastised for not demonstrating the virtues of a soldier versus those of a worker? Conservatives don't really talk about, like, diligence as a masculine virtue. They don't say, like, oh, wow, look at these young men trying hard. No, they laud muscles, aggression, physical strength, domineering, that kind of stuff. The attributes they seem to promote in young men have nothing to do with being a good, productive, functional worker or member of society. It's about being a zealous soldier who will die for the state. Fascists always fall back upon these two archetypes because ultimately fascism is worship of the state. Not the one we exist in now, the one conservatives think is like the degenerate Weimar Republic, but rather the state they want to build, the MAGA state, the fascist state they want to die for, that they're willing to die for. And they're not shy about that either. The conservative masculine gender roles they push have far more to do with being a soldier than a worker, and the conservative female gender roles they push have far more to do with being a baby factory than a provider. How often are women praised in conservative media or viral tweets or whatever for being like patient and kind with children? I don't think I've ever seen it. Whenever I see women praised for their behavior from a conservative lens, it's because they're cooking or being sexually submissive or because they're like having 18 children by the age of 35 or something, you know? Not being like kind to children. That's like, even though that's like a pretty important part of raising kids, they don't give a fuck about that. Okay, I think I've made my point. Anyway, that's what Ben Shapiro is arguing for here. Everything that he said, like, this is why I stress so much the whole, like, Republicans are Nazis bit. It's because the parallels are very one-to-one. This isn't some, like, out of nowhere, like, I'm just trying to do a shock value thing. The underlying logic of fascism is really consistent, like, whichever party or group is trying to push it. And once you identify what it is they're saying in whatever series of buzzwords or euphemisms they've chosen for this particular, delivery, you got to do that. It's very important. But aren't the traits we expect from workers in capitalism quite similar to those of soldiers? Not necessarily. Maybe if we worked in factories. But nowadays, being a good worker has more to do with introspection, customer service skills, sociability. But conservatives don't want that because socially successful people are less likely to be conservative. They tend to prey on maligned, alienated, lonely guys. So they don't promote traits that make for good working.
Actually socialize our children that way. There will be, number one, no children. Number one, there will be no healthy children. Number two, there will be no healthy children. Number three, there will be not the foundation for either social fabric, which is the real glue that holds together society, or for a functional government. Yes, monogamous marriage. I'm a fan. 15 years married, 4 kids. Yes.
Destiny, what do you think?
I think that when we talk about like relationships or marriage, I think something that's really important is we have to talk about whether or not children are being.
All right, now Destiny's job here is to outflank Ben Shapiro from the right, okay? So everything that Ben has just like gestured at and euphemized, he needs to come right for it, okay? Fourth Reich shit. Let's go.
Being discussed or not, because I think once you introduce the child aspect, I think the style or the type of relationship that you do is going to become way more important than whatever exists prior to that. Like I would agree, for instance, in terms of what Ben is saying, that there's probably going to be some structure that is ideal for the care and the raising of a child. I think that having a child gives you a much bigger buy-in to society, because now all of a sudden you care about a lot of things that you might not have before, because not only do you exist in society, you can't just run. Now you've got a child that exists there, and you've got to ensure that everything function smoothly, not just for you, but for that child as well.
That's true. I've made this argument a trillion times before, and I'm not going to repeat it here because if you've seen my content for any length of time, you've heard this rant before. But I really do think that humans were meant to raise children collectively. This isn't even a monogamy versus non-monogamy thing. Just like, this is one of the reasons why, as it's turned out, like, daycare is good for your kids and preschool is good for your kids. Because for basically all of what the hell is that? For basically all of human history, like, groups of children were raised in a village, and the kids would like run around and play together. And then when the sun would set, all the kids would be like, all right, let's go, and they'd go back to where they have to go. But like humans are meant to be socializing with their peers all the time forever. Being walled off in some suburban home where you don't interact with people your own age ever until you're like 6, that is very weird. It's no surprise that people these days, like growing up, like just there's a lot. I feel like a lot of the social anxiety that people experience is very much a product of modernity, and I think there's a lot of evidence to support that, and I think this is one of the main things that contributes to it,
And arguably, although we're getting into weird places, I guess, in the world now, like children are the primary conduit for like where you transmit like cultural values and everything. The one kind of weird thing that we're coming up against, that we have been coming up against.
By the way, I also like how Ben Shapiro pretends to be a libertarian, but at no point does the argument of, do what you want, the state can't tell you to do what you want, even comes up. Like, I'm a libertarian, but also you should organize your entire life around what's good for society, but also you should be atomized and not be a part of society. You should be part of a family, and society isn't a real thing. But also, when you're born and your whole life, you're completely subject to social values, so you actually have to live your way in perfect accordance with the... Basically, Ben Shapiro's fascism is, well... It's like the typical fascism. It's the one that is made manifest before the state. If Ben Shapiro could control the state, he would make it law. But because he can't control the state, and because it's not optically good, he has to gesture at this like this immovable social force that's meant to dictate your behavior, but isn't law. Like, you have a choice to do what you want as long as the state doesn't interfere. But it's a meaningless choice because you actually have to do what I deem to be socially responsible, Does that make sense? Like, this is what fascists do in lieu of a state. If they had the power to, they would just make all of this, they would make all of this mandatory. But Vosh, isn't the declining birth rate a massive problem for the developed world? I think a lot of that is because of monogamy. Like, you can literally chart pretty much 1-to-1 the development of the nuclear family and modern family dynamics very strongly correlate to a decline in the birth rate everywhere in the world. Around the time when the nuclear family or something approximating it becomes like the norm, the birth rate starts to decline. It's almost like there's something inhuman about locking every family off, expecting 2 parents to both work and raise children and not socializing those children with others in like a broader group environment. Again, it's more complicated than just that, but I guarantee you that a significant part of why young people don't want to have kids is because it's almost impossible to raise them, both in terms of affording them and having like space for them and accommodating them, while also working enough to be able to afford rent and stuff, Collective living in some form or another could help this. But we're just so far off from that. Like, yeah, my face when the atomized family dynamic atomizes people and leads to negative consequences. So it's the nuclear family, not monogamy. Well, there's a strong relationship between them. Monogamy, like I said, you can be monogamous, you can be non-monogamous, but you can be monogamous and also raise children collectively. There is a correlation between non-monogamous living and like raising children collectively, obviously. But yeah, it's just do whatever makes you happy, but you got to understand the broader social consequences,
Now, for some number of decades, and will continue to, is as societies progress, seems like people are having less children. And I actually don't know 100% what the answer is to that question.
I do. I know everything. I answered it. Thank you. I know. Smarter than him. I know. Intellectually outpaced. I got it. 10 trillion IQ.
I do.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. Yeah. I mean, an implementable answer that works, that we know we can get everybody on board with. It seems like for a large part of human history, having children, and it still is, having children is awesome, and children are cool, and children are magical and miraculous and all of this, but you didn't really have much competing for your attention to have a child, right? When you hit a certain age and you started working, especially if you were a woman, I mean, childbirth is kind of the next step, and then having a family, raising your children, and then doing that is kind of the next step.
But nowadays we have video games.
Nowadays, especially with women being able to work, especially with women having access to birth control, there's a lot available in the world that's competing for the interest.
I don't know how much of this is an outflanking thing, but he's basically supplying the fascist the arguments right now. Well, maybe our birth rates would be able to go back up if it wasn't for the second wave feminist revolution and, blah, blah, blah. It's like, well... I feel like there's a need here to make these arguments in the context of like what other things, like what the first thing that I would go to would probably be, I don't know, the cost of raising a kid and privatized healthcare, because as it stands right now, the implication from this would be if we remove women's rights, we would improve on this specific issue, especially given the context of the conversation.
interest of people that could otherwise be having children, such that we've almost flipped it, such that, has been brought up earlier, like wealthy people tend to have less children than not wealthy people, or unless you're part of particular religious communities that push childbirth a lot. I don't know if I would say there exists a moral imperative on an individual to have children. I think that there's a lot of interesting arguments down that path. I don't know if we're quite at the point yet where we need to say like, oh my God, we're running out of people, we need to have more kids. I don't think we're quite there yet, but we are seeing, weird demographic trends that are having big impacts on how countries are playing out. For instance, the fact that we have a disproportionately huge aging population that needs to be taken care of with medical expenses and everything, that vote in different ways than our younger population, and that when they die off, like the way that society is going to look is going to be a lot different.
Is he tired? We're at the tail end of this conversation. It feels like he's not making any points. He's just saying that it's complicated. If you're arguing against a fascist on a platform like this, I think you have a moral obligation to provide arguments in a way that suggests sort of like positive, prescriptive, like trying to put forward a good idea. It'd be like if you were having a question about like, with like a massive racist about like racial IQ differences, and you were just like, well, the data is really complicated and it's really difficult to get like, longitudinal studies, or like you can do twin studies, but even then there's like a lot of confounding factors, and it's obviously I think like the tone has to match the severity of the conversation, and you have to project kind of like the morally responsible answer, especially in the face of ambiguity, because any ambiguity with no positive prescriptive judgment, just like, well, it's complicated, you're going to take hold of that, and the fascists are going to go, well, guess birth control needs to be revoked. Destiny's debate style has been very liberal lately. Against Alex Jones, he just kept raising his voice and trying to shout over Alex. Not the best look, IMO. Well, this doesn't sound very liberal, because a liberal will be pushing back a little bit more against Ben Shapiro. I mean, he is a liberal, I guess, depending on how he feels that day. I wouldn't try to outshout Alex Jones, though. I've got a pretty loud voice, and I feel like outshouting Alex Jones has got... You're going up against like the titan of that particular debate strategy. That's a rough one to go after from that angle, but I guess.
Yeah, I don't actually have I'm not entirely sure what the future is going to look like in terms of pushing people to have kids when every single industrialized country, as they become more industrialized, have fewer and fewer and fewer children.
Rapid fire questions.
That's it? Really? That's just it? It's complicated? I don't know what you can do. It's complicated? Like, there is data that suggests there are things you can do. That's it? It's a very defeatist answer from Destiny. Didn't even really talk about non-monogamy. He didn't even say that it's cool when there's like multiple people you can have sex with because it feels good, That's a big part. It's a big part of it. Of course, it wasn't really a conversation about non-monogamy. It was a conversation about like the social fabric or whatever. Yeah, there are things that can be done to address the birth rate for sure. At the end of the day, it's just part of it is hopelessness in the lack of a better future. Part of it is that like parents are on their own when it comes to raising children. That's the case whether you're poor or rich, by the way. If you're wealthy, like that doesn't mean there's any more of an innate social fabric for you to kind of like introduce your child to. A lot of wealthy people live in very atomized environments. So that's not even like a direct, class relationship thing. I think that fundamentally people want to have kids. It's just really difficult to raise them in terms of like cost. Medical expenses are a huge thing, not even just of having the kid, but like, your kid gets a cold, or like, oh, here, wait a month to see a doctor, or go to urgent care for $500. Like there's so much stuff that impedes people. And then there's the social element as well. You're busy doing other stuff, Nobody really believes in building a family anymore. We're very individualistic, but a lot of that individualism is a product of conservative social policy, Conservatives don't give a about the family. They don't give a about like healthcare or education or whatever. They just want people, they use it as part of a broader strategy for social alienation and for controlling women. But they don't care about the social rigors of child rearing. Yes, I do think that in a lot of ways the wealthy are the most socially atomized, though obviously it varies a lot. Do you think the left is so pro-abortion and women's right that they trick themselves into being a bit too anti-having kids? I don't really think so. The data doesn't suggest that people not having kids is a product of like people being woke or feminist or whatever. Like it's like across the board in all societies, right? I don't think it's an ideological thing. This is very much like a Marxist dub with material conditions prevailing once again as an explainer of these, these social forces. We don't need to have so many kids. No, we need to have more kids. We don't have enough kids right now. We need more kids. We do. We do need more kids. We need to produce more kids. I think the best way of doing that personally would be like a broader set of social changes that encourage people to engage more locally and socially. How many people even know their neighbors anymore, honestly? It's one of the reasons why this is so prominent in places like Japan and Korea is because Japan and Korea have especially bad work cultures with especially like atomized relations between the genders as well. Kind of things up a little bit, you know? The more you encourage people to wall off into their own, you know, universe, the more you, you know, the more difficult you make it for them to child rear. It may also be that birth control actually does diminish people's interest in having babies. Like evolution didn't factor in being horny without making babies. I don't think so. Because if you want babies, like, but that's like a natural inequality thing, right? Like what you're essentially saying then is that women are essentially forced to have babies no matter what, which they kind of are in a world without birth control, you know? The only other way to get around that is for them to live lives of celibacy, which is inhuman, you know, like that's just ridiculous, right? So like I don't think that healthy human reproductive habits are built on and can only be done with forcing women to give birth. Like I think there are ways to socially engineer a better system without throwing our arms up in the air and going, no, get like just no choice, you know, like what I guess they just have to be forced. Like that's the only way that our species can have a healthy birth rate is if women are forced, you know. I just don't think that's true.